ripen. Pickers do their best to have no more than 2 green for every 100 red cherries they harvest. They empty their bins into bags and load them into trucks. Each bin produces about 2 kilos of coffee beans, enough to make about 200 cups of coffee. The fresher the berry, the better the flavor. Cherries picked in the morning are at the wet mill, ready for processing that afternoon. At the wet mill, water channels wash the cherries and drop them off at a worm screw. It loads them into a pulping machine to remove the outer skin and fruit. A rotating drum presses the cherries against the wall of the pulper and squeezes out the bean. From the pulping machine, the beans flow in water to 2 large rotating cylinders. They sift the beans to separate them from any of the hard green cherries that passed through the pulping machine. Next, the beans bathe in more water, which draws out a thick, sugary substance known as miel, honey in Spanish. The coffee maker then feels the washed beans to make sure they're no longer sticky. The beans then drop into the drying bin below. Workers now lay out the beans to dry in the traditional way, outdoors on a cement patio. For 4 days, they rake over the beans as they dry in the hot sun. At night, they let the beans rest to extract the most flavor. Once the beans are dry, they go into a milling machine. Inside, large stones grind away the parchment-like hull from the bean. Drying methods vary among coffee makers. They're a closely guarded secret. The beans can also dry mechanically in rotating drums that pump in heated air. Workers closely monitor the process and empty the drums when the beans are dry. A supervisor smells them to check for a vinegar-like odor. That would mean the beans are fermenting, a result of improper drying. The dry beans have their husks removed, then go onto an oscillating table that separates them by weight into 3 grades, the heaviest being the first-grade beans. Workers pour out each grade into burlap bags. Their contents must weigh in at exactly 69 kilos per bag. Finally, they stitch them up and stack them for shipping. Next, we'll see the whole process that turns these green coffee beans into a steaming cup of gourmet coffee. It's the concentrated brew that packs espresso's punch. These green coffee beans have just arrived from the wet mill. Workers pour them into a blending bin that feeds a roasting machine heated to 180 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the oils in the beans combust and the beans roast in less than 20 minutes. The master roaster must regularly check their progress. When he determines they're ready, he sets off a light spray of water in the roaster to extinguish the beans. Then they pour into a bin where they're cooled by forced air. As they roast, the beans go from green to golden brown, then black. Before roasting an entire shipment of beans, coffee makers first test a small batch. They follow a standardized procedure at the plant's testing laboratory. First, they roast 300 grams of beans in a small gas oven for a few minutes. Then, a professional taster measures out the beans and feeds them into an electric grinder. She prepares 4 separate cups. Back on the factory floor, the various beans for the blend go into a grinder. It will produce the desired grind, coarse, medium, or a fine espresso like this.